everybody. So happy to see you all again. And today we will touch on strategic communications. Primary goal today is to begin mapping out our strategic communications plan. We'll be spent thinking about our audiences. Well, who's it for? Should we modify our positioning statement by audience? No, that is our overarching promise to the world, and then we can tailor our communications plan. We can certainly tailor our messages. We can tailor our channels, our messengers, again, by audience, but we have to understand who they are and what they care about. All right, so strategic communications planning, what is the unique space that we occupy in our audience's mind, right? That's the core question. But strategic communications, right, is a very specialized approach to distributing and receiving information, right? Making sure that we are communicating in the clearest possible way our messages through the right channels, right, to the right people at the right time. Understanding our audience is so fundamental to doing any of this work. The path to effective strategic communications can be revealed by answering these kind of core questions. Who do you need to reach with your message and why? Who is essential to making that a reality? What will the content of your message be? Right? Really thinking at its core, what are we trying to communicate? How and when will we deliver these messages? So that's really important, understanding the audience and what channels you'll use. How do we reach them? And once you're anchored in the purpose, it really gives you so much clarity as you move forward in your communications efforts. So you're able to think about, am I reaching a national audience? Is this for a global audience? And then you can make those decisions. The audience really is at the core of that decision making. All right, strategic communications planning continued, right? So there's no better time than now. No better time to start thinking about how will you communicate strategically, because we have finite resources, both of resources in terms of time, dollars, talent. And so we want to make sure that whatever we do has the maximum impact. Focusing on when and how you use your voice. So this is really, really important in thinking about, should we weigh in on this particular topic? Really have to be disciplined about when and how they use their voice, because you don't want to fracture your voice, right? In thinking about, well, what is the best and highest use of our voice in advocating for an issue, elevating an issue, sharing our platform, right, with stakeholders who may not have, right, the same access and visibility that we do. So that is really important in thinking about how we use our voice and how we use our channels. So getting started, we're getting settled in now. We have some of the foundational pieces in place. Big picture, like what's a big picture? What are you trying to achieve with your organization, with a particular project or program? And there are three kind of core elements, right? Your goal, the change you want to create, your objective, your steps that you'll take to get there, and then finally, the decision maker who will help you to achieve your objective. So within one goal, as you know, there could be several objectives and several decision makers who will help activate different levers across your objectives. So really thinking about decision maker singular, because you may have multiple across your various objectives. Right, so a couple of pro tips here. Do our communications line up with our strategic plans? Your communications efforts should dovetail with your strategic plan more broadly. They go hand in hand. Where are we not getting attention, where we want to have greater impact? So really thinking about, has the environment or context changed enough? How often should one change, right? Or positioning statement? Not that often, but if something material changes, then we want to make sure that we update our positioning statement. Loosely a 12 to 18 month runway for your communications planning, because things shift, right? And you don't want to have a 5-year communications plan. We may have new channels, the environment's changed, the intensity of a particular issue, narrative may have shifted. So you don't want to have a plan that has too long a shelf life, but you certainly don't want to have a communications plan on a monthly or a quarterly basis. You don't want to shift that radically. Goal, if your mission is why you're doing what you do, then your goal is what you're doing to get there. And as noted here, right, your communications plan, I wouldn't go past 2 years, right? In the ideal world, 12 to 18, 24 is tough, but like an anniversary could be something, right, that you could plan in year 1 and execute in year 2. For example, if you have something really notable, but in an ideal world, you want to keep it nice and tight so that you have the flexibility to adapt. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Stephen to break it up here. Stephen, do you want to walk us through this section?
Oh, I'm Stephen, by the way. I work with Kerry-Ann very closely. You've never met me before, but now you know me. All right, so once you have that goal out, now you go a layer lower, a layer deeper, and that's your objective, right? So the objective really is, what concrete step will you take to achieve your big goal? It's programmatic. Communication strategies support a team's goal, but there is a difference between a goal and an objective. What are the individual steps that you can take to actually get to that bigger goal, right? A goal will take many decisions to get accomplished. It's a victory, as we talked about. It's the light at the end of the tunnel. In the case, for example, of ensuring paid sick leave, you got to raise money. You got to get companies to adopt voluntary policies. You have to pass policy at the state and federal level, and you have to get workers to actually take the leave rather than go to work sick. So these are all objectives on your way to achieving the goal of ensuring paid sick leave. Many of you probably also know SMARTY. SMARTY objectives are essential for good communication strategy. You don't want your objectives to be very broad or vague. You actually want them to be very specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time-bound, inclusive, and equitable. So objectives can either include behavior change, altering the way people act, or it could be a policy change, altering government or corporate policy. And then, of course, as many of you are very deeply familiar with, you can have fundraising objectives, which are vital for a lot of you. More often than not, as we said before, you're going to need multiple objectives to achieve your big, hairy, audacious goal. It is likely that the decision makers, audiences, and messages for each objective will be different. But something to note is that each objective really should have one specific decision maker that needs to come on board, whether that is like the mayor or it's mothers of teens age 17 to 19, something like that. Those are your specific decision makers for each objective. So each objective should have one. So here are a few objectives for you to look at. So if your goal is to end health disparities in your city, your policy objective could be about passing a city ordinance within the next 2 years, right? So it's got to be time bound, that prevents the closure of the 2 major hospitals that communities of color and people living on low incomes rely on. Your behavior change objective might be to train, again, a very specific number, 33% of county healthcare staff on the impact of systemic racism in healthcare within the next 12 months. Again, time bound, 12 months, very specific, 33% of county healthcare staff. And again, you want it to be achievable, right? So we could have made this objective train 100% of county healthcare staff, but 100% is going to be a lot harder to achieve in just 12 months, right? 33% is something that we can really hang our hat on when we get there and say, okay, we did it. And now when you rewrite your strategic communications objective in a year, you can say, why don't we bump that up to 50%, you know, or 66%, or whatever the case may be. Your fundraising objective: raise $200,000 by next fall to develop and implement cultural competency training for community health workers in specific facilities. We should pay attention to this one if y'all have fundraising objectives that you want to include in your own SMARTY objectives. What I will say is that it's not just raise $200,000 by next fall. It doesn't end there, because we want to be specific about what exactly we want to raise the money for, right? We want to make sure that we are going to use that money to develop and implement cultural competency training for community health workers in specific facilities. That is not just saying we need money, but why we need the funding and by when and how much. $200,000 seems doable, right? It's not we need, $10 million to be viable in the next 15 years. It's in the next 8 months or so, $200,000. And this is what we're going to use it for. You can have all three, but you don't necessarily need all three.
Audiences. We've touched on this. Which audiences do we need to motivate, educate, right? To join us in the movement? Are your audiences ready to act, right? So oftentimes we're thinking about it on that continuum from awareness to action, like where are they on that continuum? What do your audiences care about? And how will you motivate your audiences, right? Like what motivates them for policymakers, human interest stories, real lives, and data are two places, two levers that we can motivate and encourage them. When you think about your audiences, think about segments of people, right? The general public is never an audience. So just if you take nothing else away from this section of the presentation, is that we never want to reach out to the general public, right? Few messages appeal to all people, right? So we want to think about what that looks like. And then I'm going to turn it over to Stephen.
The general public is not an audience. Also, the media is rarely an audience because you want to think about the media as a conduit to reach your audiences. Who is reading a news article? Who is consuming a broadcast television channel that you want to reach? So you really want to be specific when you're thinking about your audiences. And to do that, we have an audience mapping exercise. So this is what we do in order to really get inside the heads of our audience members, okay? We call this an audience map. Think about one of these audience members that you feel maybe a little bit less confident about. Somebody that you probably should be reaching, but that maybe for whatever reason you're not quite reaching, or you just want to tap into them a little bit more. Maybe it's a specific program partner who should be managed closely, but isn't actually being managed closely. Now, the best thing to do is just imagine a day in the life of this audience member. What are they thinking? What are they feeling? And really specifically, what are they seeing? What are they actually consuming? What are they watching? What are they hearing? Are they dropping off their kids at school every day? Are they like running around, packing lunches, going to swim practice in the summertime? Is it summer camp season? Are they home alone and they just like don't know what to do with their time? Get really specific when you think about your audiences in order to really understand how best to reach them with your messages and how you can reach them. Now, if you have multiple audience members you want to reach, you can fill out multiple audience maps and make copies of these for different people that you want to target.
So who, if really thinking about a person and a particular objective, a particular step towards your goal, who will make this objective, this critical step, this critical rung on the ladder possible? And the ultimate decision maker is the person or people who have or has the power to give you what you want, to get to the desired result, who can say yes or no, green light or not. Determining your decision maker requires you to be very specific. So, right, when we think about discipline, like this is another place, right, where we don't want a series of commas and ands, right? We really want to be very specific. The decision maker can't be multiple groups or multiple individuals, right? Like the goal here is we have a particular objective in mind, and this group or this individual, right, can help us move our objective forward. Who's the right messenger? How do we reach them? What do they consume? Who are their kind of trusted channels for information? And so we can't answer those questions if we're not specific about the who's. Thank you all so much for the level of engagement on today's masterclass session. Communications is so key to creating the change that we want to see. And so we're really, really delighted.